Okay, I'll start. There'll be people coming in, what I can see, but I'll start anyway because of the time. I'm Martin Taal. Today I'll talk about EMFT TEXO, which is an EMF modeling project. In my daily life, I'm a software architect at several ERP companies delivering business administration applications. One of them is also an open source company called OpenBravo, and there I'm a technical architect responsible for the rich internet application architecture. And many parts of the EMF TEXO work are based on the experience in this environment. I'm also a functional architect at another ERP company, and I also do other consulting work. But today I'll talk about the EMFT TEXO. EMFT TEXO is part of the EMF modeling group. It's one of the few projects within the EMF group which is focused on web applications. Most other projects when you look around the EMF group are focused on RCPs or development time. EMFT TEXO is really focused on web environments and web server environments. EMF TEXO has both a development side to it as well as a runtime side. At development time, you generate artifacts, code artifacts, which you use in your web application. At runtime, EMF TEXO provides several layers, helping you to, for example, to create a web service layer and some other things which I will show in this presentation. In this presentation, I'll have like 3 or 4 slides, and after the slides, I'll do a short demo with code generation, showing us a really small, very modest HTML5 user interface. And I'll conclude with a few slides. EMF TEXO is based on some frustration I had with Eclipse Modeling Framework myself, looking at the type of code which got generated from the Eclipse Modeling Framework. It was not, in my opinion, it was not suited for web environments, especially server environments. It had a lot of overhead, a lot of extra code which I didn't need and didn't want. And I missed many things which I think were important for a web server environment. If you look at the EMF TEXO focus, it's focused on supporting business-oriented web applications. So it's focused on people who want to do grids and forms and views inside of a web application on a mobile phone or on a web server. Because the way it works, because it also has a server side and specific attention is being paid between client and server communication, there's also possibilities to develop an RCP on top of EMF TEXO. So you can develop one UI for an RCP and use the same server side for the web environment. And as I said, it's both a generated code as well as a runtime solution code. Let me talk about the first part. What EMF TEXO does, it supports GPA entity generation, which is very similar to what when you generate EMF code, you also get entities or business objects, but you don't get GPA annotations. EMF TEXO is based also on experience with the EMF Teneo project. So what I'll do, what the code does, it generates automatically all kinds of GPA annotation inside the code. You can also choose to generate a separate ORM XML, so then your code stays clean of any annotations. The code generation supports most, or let's say, all eCore and XSD constructs. So you can generate code from an XSD, from XML schema, as well as from eCore files. The code which gets generated are real Java POJOs. So you can use this code, which is really different from EMF E-objects. You can use this code in any framework, in Spring, in DWT. You can make use of this code because it just uses a plain Java API. All the model-oriented stuff, everything related to eCore and EMF is generated in separate classes, which you don't need to use, which you don't need to generate at all. What you can do is you can change the code. You can change the generated code manually in the same way as EMF. So there's like a generated annotation. And when you change the code manually and you regenerate, the manual changes will remain in the code. So they won't be overwritten. Anyway, in many ways, it follows the same approach as the Eclipse Modeling Framework. So in many ways, some parts are the same as the Eclipse Modeling Framework. Other parts are really different. For example, what I did recently, I implemented Extend2 as a templating language. So now the code generation is about 10 times faster than before, and much faster than the original EMF code generation also. The code generation and the GPA generation can be controlled in detail using an annotation model, which is described on the wiki, but I won't talk about that in this presentation because it goes in some detail. But you can control basically anything. You can control the names of setters and getters, you can control the names of columns, you can control the names of join columns, you can do association override, secondary tables. All these things can be specified in a separate model, so you don't need to pollute your Java code. And you can do all the changes and all the control from a model perspective and not in the Java code themselves. And as I said, if you're not satisfied with the generated code, you can change the generated code and regenerate. So the code generation is something you do at development time, based on an eCore model and an XSD model. At runtime, what Texo does, it uses the model, the eCore model at runtime, to automatically generate or have available a web service layer. So the web service layer, when you have your eCore model with business or domain model in there with business objects, like a library and a writer, or an order and an order line, when you place the Texo libraries inside of a web server, you automatically have a JSON and XML web service layer. So you can type in URLs where you retrieve all the orders, all the sales order lines. You can do queries and some other things. So that's based on that's automatically available for you if you use Texo. This JSON XML web service layer or CRUD layer is based on experience with an ERP system. An ERP system is very much focused on retrieving data and updating and deleting and data in the database. So it's also focused on all kinds of knowledge are put in there to solve high performance or high volume cases. There's, for example, a small thing that if you have a table with about, let's say, 1 million records, doing a count on the table is not possible in, well, it takes you 30 seconds or something. So if you want to show a grid in your web application, and you want to show a nice scroll bar on the side and support paging, what most other solutions do, they say you have to send the count back to the client and then a nice scroll bar can be shown. But even doing a count on a table of this size is not possible. So what we do in EMF Texo, we use like smart counting. And for example, we get 1 record more from the query, and if there's 1 record more, you know that there's more records in the database, etc., etc. It's like a fair amount of detail are put in there just to cover cases with high volumes. For example, in a grid, you often want to show not only a sales order, but also the business partner name, or the bank account of the business partner, or something else, which is like associated information. All these things can be retrieved, or Texo automatically or efficiently retrieves this information from you from the database by doing joins in the queries, automatically joining in the query. So it's just a number of examples. You can do mass updates and mass deletes in one request to the server. For example, if you want to do everything within one transaction. You can do queries with named queries as well as queries with parameters using JSON. So the JSON layer is quite complete from a functional perspective. Inside, on the server side, both the JSON and the XML layer use the same base code. So the XML and the JSON layer are very similar. They have the same functionality. The difference is the way, of course, the information. You get it in XML or you post in XML. One other nice thing I see there on the slide, and I forgot to mention it, for example, if you update something on the database, an object, and the server side changes this object while persisting, what Texo does for you, it sends the object back to you to the client, which is also like a detail which is important if you have server-side changes or triggers in the database which change data while persisting. And that's something you're not exactly going to find this in other solutions. When people talk about JSON web service layer, there's like a lot of details in there which are covered here. Okay, what I'll do in a demo, it's a small demo using the EMF library model. What I'll do in the general, I'll generate some code, or first show the model, generate some code for you. I'll show you the code. It's part of a dynamic web project. So I can show you, I'll start the web server, and I'll show a small HTML5 interface, and I'll show you some JSON and XML web service calls in the background. So let's give it a try. I'm not sure if it's familiar for you what this model, but it's like it's a very simple model, but in a way it's nice because it has both several primitive types as well as associations as well as list associations in it. when you install Texel plugins in your environment, you get basically what happens. You get on the right mouse click on an eCore model or an XSD. You get an extra option called Texo here, which allows you several ways of generating code. It's also possible in the project properties to set automatic code generation. So every time when you change the model, the system automatically regenerates for you. It regenerates here in the source gen folder, which is currently empty. Well, you didn't see anything, did you? Because the first time it takes a bit longer, but when you, after running the first time, it's quite quick. So here's the generated code. Let me try again. But you see, I missed the reference to identifiable, because I should also have generated this one. And now it's solved. So this is an example of the generated code. It's quite simple. You have an entity, which has some primitive things, and enumerated, and a reference, for example, to an author. I could have, there's also, as I said, there's Texel properties, which allows you to set, for example, automatic generation of model code whenever you change the model. So this is what happens. This is the thing you do at development time. You generate code. At runtime, to get to a JSON web service layer, you don't need to do anything special. So what I'll do, I'll start the web server. This is for the people who know GPA. This is the persistence XML behind it. I use an in-memory database, so initially I start with an empty database. Let me go to the user interface. This is an example of HTML5 user interface. What you can see there, it consists of showing a set of libraries. Currently there are no records. Texel provides a nice utility, which is called which is called the test data generator. So based on any eCore model or XSD model, you can generate test data. And what Texel does for you, it generates thousands of objects, thousands of libraries, books, or sales orders, or order lines, or customers, or anything else. It's being used in the test framework of Texel, but I also use it for demos, and it's a great way to test your software. I don't hear many people talk about generation of test data, but it's really a great way to test your software. So let's generate some test data. Here, what you see are generated 10 libraries, 100 writers, and 900 books. And here you can see those libraries, what happens. So this is a small HTML5 user interface, which retrieves the libraries and books while I'm writing. What's also support is paging. I'm not sure how many people know the Google Chrome developer toolset. But for example, here on the side, it's very small. Here you see the requests which are being done. And what you see is that not every page actually, every so many times you get a request to the server, because you get a page of documents. Here you can see what the request is. What I request is a set of books, and the response is JSON in this case, which is a set of books with some metadata around it. So this is the JSON web service layer, which shows you it's a lot of detail here, but it gives you some metadata around the object and also other information. What Texel also does, if you have a reference to something, for example, from a book to a writer, you also get the title of this writer. And that saves you an extra request on the client, for example. So those things are solved for you when doing requests for a JSON object. All the references also contain titles of those objects. And that helps a lot to prevent the number of requests. Here's the number of writers, which will And here you can also see at a certain point, here you see that the system starts to ask for writers. So this is like a small HTML5 user interface. Within EMF Texo, the idea is where we started was on the server side, generating code. Then we moved to a JSON web service layer, an XML web service layer, and the next step is developing HTML5 user interfaces on the basis of the model. So we used the eCore model and the XSD model to generate the HTML5 user interface, and this is just a small start of it. Google Chrome has a great way of testing REST APIs. I can show you in a small example, for example, here for XML. This is an example which retrieves all the books in this example. It's I should not have done that because now the browser is very because there are 900 books. Let me get one book. Well, it doesn't. Here you have the raw response, which is in this case XML. So which is basically the same. I could also have done JSON here, and that's where you get the JSON back. And the same thing you can do the get, post, the put, delete. What I mentioned before, you can do queries using a JSON object as the query string. So that's the, and of course update and delete and all the other things are also supported. I won't show you that here. So that's basically a small demo of generating code, showing the runtime layer. Really to get the JSON XML web service layer up and running, I didn't have to do anything than generate the code. And there's one line of code somewhere which tells the runtime layer which e-package it is. So that's all there is to it, and that's all done on the basis of the model. So that concludes the demo side. I talked mainly about web applications. Well, the same web service call, so the same JSON web service layer can also be used to connect an RCP to the server side. And for this, what we recently developed is a Texo EMF JSON resource, which allows you to talk directly to a JSON web server using your RCP. So that's a great way to, on the server side, to have the same environment, while on the client side, you had both RCPs as well as web applications. And then on the RCP side, within the user interface, you use EMF objects. Because of the notifications and other extra code, it's great for developing RCP applications. I mentioned a few other topics. One other thing what Texo supports is data access object layer generation. It's sometimes a discussion if it's really necessary, data objects, but people like them. So that's why we added them to Texo. Test data generation and mass testing are really great topics, and Texo also provides a solution there. So it's really a great way to test your software by bombarding with mass amounts of data. You can easily override and extend the generation templates inside development project. So for example, I was generating code inside this dynamic web project. I could have had a template inside of this project and get different entities, or get additional methods in entities, or get additional classes. These things are all possible. The templating language I use there is Expand, and the templating language used for Texo itself is Extend2. XSD support is great and almost complete, I would say. There are some corner cases which are not supported, but most things of even XSDs and XML schema are supported. So Texo also is a great XML schema to relational database mapping application. Well, future topics. My idea is to develop an HTML5 user interface, or what I'm working on, using Senja or Enjo. It's a bit of a choice currently, which direction to go for. I'm not going into the Google Web Toolkit direction as of now, but if people are interested here and want to work on Google Web Toolkit and combined with Texo, it's great. Please come forward, and it would be great to work together. looking at Senja and NGO, there are two different solutions, but both of them are really JavaScript oriented and HTML5 oriented. And the idea in the future is to also support other code generation patterns, where currently you generate everything in a folder and you can change the code. The idea is also to support other types of approaches. Well, this is the concluding slide of this presentation. I'm fairly on time. There's a wiki talking about all these topics and many other topics. It gives a fair amount of detail on annotation models, on code generation, on templates. It talks about the GPA annotations. So there's enough to see there. It also talks about the JSON web server layer and about the web server code, on how to extend that code on the server side. So please visit that wiki. If you have any questions, you can always ask them on the EMF forum, and most people at EMF, or most developers at EMF, are very keen to answer questions quite quickly. So feel free to ask them there. I have a small blog which I publish every few weeks, new developments on Texo and Teneo. So you can also find information there about Texo. So that's like my concluding slide. I hope it was an interesting overview of Texo, with introductional slides and a demo. So I hope it gives you some motivation or some ideas to give it a try, and also give feedback, and if you're interested to contribute in one way or another, it's always welcome too. So thanks for your attention. If you have any questions, we have like 2 minutes or 3 minutes time before the next speaker will arrive.
You mentioned that when the objective changes server side, the client gets an update.
Yeah.
How is that implemented?
No, the single client gets an update. So it's not so, Texo does not distribute yet the changes, although in HTML5 it's possible, because you can have like a live connection to the browser. But at this point in time, only the client who updates gets the revised object back. And this also works, by the way, in the RCP integration. So in the RCP Texo JSON resource, if you update the server, you get a changed object back. The user interface will show this changed object also. But it's an interesting topic to also support it for, like, to broadcast it. That's for sure an interesting topic. Other questions? Okay, thanks for your attention. Have a good day. Bye.